Farm Journal Report on U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by CropLife America. CropLife America knows that the EPA's Endangered Species Act work plan may impact how you manage your fields and pest pressures. Learn more about what is changing and how CropLife is fighting for practical solutions at croplifeamerica.org/ESA.
Well, it all started with inauguration on Monday. As President Trump took office, the executive orders that followed were swift and direct. So what's ahead, and how could it shape the state of agriculture in the months ahead? That's this week's Farm Journal Report.
Monday marked the start of President Donald Trump's second term.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
And as the 47th president, he ushered in his new term with sweeping actions.
I return to the presidency confident and optimistic that we are at the start of a thrilling new era of national success.
Following the inauguration, Trump got straight to work signing a slew of executive orders and rescinding 78 executive actions introduced during the Biden administration. Among what was signed included declaring a national energy emergency to open up more drilling across the U.S. and detailed an American first trade policy.
It's warp speed. It's even faster than I thought.
Farm Journal Washington correspondent Jim Wiesmeyer has been covering Washington for more than 50 years, and he says this is the quickest and most dramatic action of any presidency he's covered.
What you have to remember is that this is just not his fifth year of the presidency. He was out of office for 4 years, but all those 4 years, he and his top allies, they were working on a new administration. So he was built up, ready to go. And that's why you're seeing so many things in pell-mell action.
During his remarks in the Oval Office on Monday, Trump said he may enact 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada on February 1st. Trump also saying this week he's still considering a 10% tariff on all Chinese imports amid concerns about the fentanyl trafficking.
We're talking about a tariff of 10% on China based on the fact that they're sending fentanyl to Mexico and Canada.
How soon on those tariffs?
Probably February 1st is the date we're looking at.
And Wiesmeyer says of everything that happened this week, the biggest impact on ag is the talk of tariffs.
But with anything Trump, you just can't listen to the comments. You really have to wait for the details. The market thought, the financial markets, energy markets, soybean markets thought that he was going to be reticent relative to China. And then just the very next day, he said, well, 10% tariffs, maybe we'll start on February 1.
Trump's team released a memo on trade, which Wiesmeyer described as revealing.
He wants his top people throughout the interagencies to do an impact analysis of trade for the USMCA, Mexico and Canada, China. How did they fulfill or not fulfill the Phase 1 agreement? That's going to take months. So I'm skeptical of this February 1 timeline.
The January Ag Economist Monthly Monitor released this week asked which of Trump's priorities will have the most negative impact on agriculture. 79% said it's trade and tariffs, 22% said border security and deportation. When asked which of Trump's priorities would have the most positive impact on ag, 54% of economists said cutting regulations and 38% said tax changes. Trump's pick for USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins testifying before the Senate Ag Committee this week. In her opening statements, Rollins outlined several key priorities, including quickly deploying disaster and economic assistance already passed by Congress, addressing current animal disease outbreaks, modernizing and realigning USDA, and focusing on the health of rural communities.
Having served in the last White House for 3 years, right alongside President Trump, I believe I may be the most well-versed in how the interagency process works, of all the cabinet, of how the interagency process works, of how the discussions are handled, of what the Oval Office meetings look like, and how to ensure that at every corner that my team, that our community, that what we all represent together is at the table fighting for what we believe is necessary for these communities.
Ahead of Rollins' testimony this week, the Farm Journal Monthly Monitor found 80% of ag economists think Rollins will be positive for U.S. agriculture. But if approved, she already has hurdles to overcome, as 64% of economists say that the row crop side of agriculture is currently in a recession, and 86% say the current economics of low commodity prices and high input costs will cause more consolidation in agriculture. Even with the recent run-up in prices, John Newton, who's executive head of Terrain, says margins are still very tight.
We know input costs are still pretty high, and I had a chance to sit down with my farm credit colleagues 2 weeks ago. We were looking at, the settlement price, the future settlement price, and lining it up with break evens, and it's still a tight environment.
Newton says analysis from FarmDoc shows many Illinois farmers are still facing prices below break even.
These higher prices are helpful, and we've got a tight stocks environment on the corn side. We're going to see that bidding for acres really heat up over the next few months to settle in on what we plant and what those prices are going to be.
Enrollment period for ARC or PLC also kicked off this week, and recent analysis by Newton and his team shows coverage levels for some crops could hit a near all-time high.
The guarantees on Ark County for corn at $5.03 a bushel, at soybeans at $12.17 a bushel, compared to PLC effective reference prices of $4.26 a bushel on corn and $9.66 a bushel on soybeans. I think it's a little bit easier from a corn and soybean perspective to look at Ark County over PLC.
But he says there's some crops that haven't seen their safety net change since the 2014 Farm Bill.
Rice and peanuts are still looking at the same level of support that they had a decade ago, which, I think leaders in Congress are trying to adjust that with this next farm bill.
If confirmed, Rollins will also be in charge of rolling out a new farm bill. But what would be her top priority if she does take the helm at USDA? Newton says it depends on what you produce and where you live.
If you're a dairy farmer right now, the most important thing is preventing the spread of the bird flu in the dairy cattle population. If you're raising chickens down in Georgia, the bird flu is the scariest thing on your mind right now. If you're raising, rice, cotton, peanuts, the support levels in the farm bill are probably top of mind for you. So it changes depending on where you are. I mean, specialty crop producers have long needed better access to risk management tools. Ag labor is a big challenge as well.
Some critics say Rollins doesn't have enough production ag experience to lead USDA. But Wiesmeyer says with a strong Deputy Secretary of Agriculture by her side, the fact that she has Trump's trust is more important.
Brooke Rollins has worked closely with President Trump for years. So I always like a cabinet member who can pick up the phone herself and call that chief of staff at the White House, Susie Wiles, and get directly to the president. You can't pay for that one. So that's access.
From the unknown of what Trump's mass deportation will mean for agriculture to the concerns about rough waters with trade, the health of agriculture could hinge on any major changes and curveballs that happen in Trump's first 100 days.
An update on reopening the U.S.-Mexico border to feeder cattle imports. That's after the detection of New World screwworm. A glimpse of Ag Around the World is next.